It was a drizzly Tuesday evening when I clocked in for my shift at Colonel's Corner, the KFC off the downtown strip. I had been working there since the start of my college days. The place was small but always buzzing, especially at night when hungry people came in for late dinners or to escape the rain. The air inside was heavy with the smell of frying oil, grease, and that distinct aroma of chicken that clung to your clothes even hours after your shift. Mrs. Thompson, my manager, greeted me at the door. She was a tired woman, the kind whose eyes looked like they hadn't rested in years. "Melissa called out sick again," she sighed. "So you're on drive-through duty tonight, Sam. Can you handle it?" "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. The night dragged on like any other. Orders came and went, buckets of chicken, spicy wings, fries, and the rain outside grew louder, drumming against the glass. Around 10:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before closing, the front door chimed. That's when he walked in. He was drenched, his soaked coat leaving a trail of water on the freshly mopped floor. But it wasn't just the water that unsettled me. It was his clothes. He wore a tattered suit jacket over what looked like a costume piece, a pirate-style shirt, ruffled cuffs sticking out at the wrists, stained with something darker than rain. His face was pale, his hair stringy and plastered to his forehead. "We're closing soon, but I can still take your order," I called out, trying to sound casual. He stared at me with eyes that seemed far too calm, too empty. Then in a low, gravelly voice he said, "Not here to eat. Just need to know." "What time you close?" 11, I replied cautiously. "But we stop taking orders in about 10 minutes. "Thanks," he muttered. And just as abruptly as he entered, he turned and left, disappearing into the rain toward an old van parked beneath the streetlight. Something about him crawled under my skin, the way he didn't blink, the way his words felt. Deliberate, like he wasn't really asking, just confirming. I brushed it off, trying to convince myself it was nothing, but it wasn't. When closing time came, I carried out the last bags of trash to the dumpster behind the restaurant. The lot was eerily quiet except for the steady hiss of rain. My sneakers splashed in puddles as I dragged the bags along. That's when I heard it, a rustling. At first I thought it was just a stray cat. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. Another shuffle. Then from behind the dumpster the man stepped into view. His face was calm, too calm, as though he had been waiting for me. The rain glistened off his hair and clothes. "Fancy seeing you here," he whispered, taking a slow step closer. My throat went dry. "Look, we're closed." "You need to leave," I stammered. He didn't. Instead, he lifted something in his hand, letting it sway in the dim light. It was a dead raccoon, limp and soaked, its fur matted and slick with blood. "Thought you might want some real chicken," he sneered, swinging it by the tail like a grotesque trophy. Panic surged through me. I dropped the trash bags and bolted for the back door, slamming it shut and locking it behind me. My hands trembled as I told Mrs. Thompson what happened. She peered out the window, her face pale. "Call the police," she ordered. I dialed 911, my eyes fixed on the lot. The man was still there, standing motionless in the rain, staring back at me. His expression was unreadable, and then, just before the sirens approached, he vanished into the night. The police searched the area but found nothing. No man, no raccoon. Only muddy footprints leading to the road where the van had been parked. For the next week, the air at Colonel's Corner was heavy with fear. Every shift felt longer. Every shadow made me jump. Mrs. Thompson installed brighter floodlights near the dumpster, but the unease didn't go away. And then, a week later, it happened again. Another rainy night, another closing shift. As I stepped out to take the trash, I froze. Pinned to the dumpster with a small, sharp knife was a note. The words were scrawled in frantic, jagged handwriting. "You can't hide from me." My stomach twisted. I ripped the note off and ran inside, shoving it into Mrs. Thompson's trembling hands. The police came again, this time pulling CCTV footage from the area. They found the old van, abandoned on the far side of the city. Inside were masks, costumes, multiple sets of plates, and other unsettling items. It looked like the van had been used for a string of petty thefts. But the man himself? He was gone. I tried to convince myself that I'd never see him again. But on my last day at KFC, just before college graduation, my nightmare returned. As I walked to my car after my shift, I stopped dead in my tracks. Tied to my car's antenna, fluttering in the cold night air, was a fresh raccoon tail. Blood still dripped from it. My hands shook as I tore it off and drove straight to the police station, the tail slapping grotesquely against my windshield as I sped through the rain. They promised to watch my family's house. They promised they'd find him. But months passed. Nothing. I moved to another city, another life. But every rainy night I still feel it, that crawling sensation of being watched, of eyes lingering just beyond the edge of the light. Some stories don't have endings. Some predators never stop hunting. And sometimes the smell of wet fur and fried chicken is enough to take me back to that night, when a stranger swung a dead raccoon at me and promised without words that he wasn't done. I wasn't supposed to work that night. It was a shift I had traded last minute with Claire because she had a date, and honestly, I needed the extra cash. I didn't think much of it then, but later I couldn't stop asking myself, what if Claire had been here instead of me? It was just after midnight at our KFC on the edge of town. The place always felt different at that hour, too quiet, too hollow. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting sickly yellow reflections on the greasy tile floor. The smell of chicken and oil clung heavy in the air, mixed with the faint sourness of mop water. The store was technically closed, but we still had a few things left to finish. Cleaning the fryers, mopping the lobby, locking the freezer. Mrs. Lewis, the manager, had already gone out back for a smoke, leaving me alone behind the counter. That's when I heard the front door creak. It shouldn't have opened. It had been locked. At first I thought maybe Mrs. Lewis had come back through the front instead of the back door. But when I looked up, my stomach turned cold. A man stood in the entrance, tall, thin, his face half hidden under the hood of a dark raincoat. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there dripping water onto the tiles. The door swung shut behind him with a slow, echoing click. Sir? We're closed, I said, trying to sound firm. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked, slow, deliberate steps across the dining room until he reached the counter. His movements were unnatural, stiff, as though he were forcing his body to imitate something human. When he finally stopped in front of me, he leaned down slightly, and that's when I noticed his eyes. They were wide, too wide, staring at me with a glassy intensity that made my skin crawl. "What's the special tonight?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, wet, like someone who had swallowed water. My mouth went dry. "Sir, the kitchen's closed. I can't serve you anything now." He just stood there, silent. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. I took a step back, my hand drifting toward the phone on the counter. "I'll have to ask you to leave, okay?" That's when his mouth twisted into the faintest grin. "You're still cooking." The words made my blood run cold, because from where I stood I could hear the faint hiss of fryer oil still cooling in the back kitchen. Somehow, he knew. Before I could react, the man reached into his coat and pulled something out. My stomach lurched. It wasn't a gun, it wasn't a knife. It was a chicken bone, yellowed, brittle, cracked at the ends. He placed it gently on the counter, sliding it toward me with one finger. "Family recipe," he rasped, his eyes never leaving mine. I stumbled back, knocking into the soda machine, the clatter echoing far too loud in the empty store. My breath came fast and shallow. That's when Mrs. Lewis came back through the side door, cigarette still glowing between her fingers. "What the hell's going on here?" she barked. The man didn't move. He just turned his head slowly toward her, that awful grin spreading wider. Then, without a word, he backed away. Step by step, never breaking eye contact until he reached the door. He slipped out into the rain, the glass pane swinging shut behind him with a soft click. We locked the doors, called the police, gave them a description. They searched the area but found nothing. No footprints in the mud, no tire tracks in the lot. But when I went back to the counter, heart pounding, palms sweating, the chicken bone was still there. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake it. Every shift felt haunted. Every shadow in the parking lot looked like a figure waiting for me. I kept seeing those glassy eyes in my head, the way he said, "You're still cooking." I tried to laugh it off, to tell myself he was just some crazy drifter. But then, a month later, something happened that made me realize it wasn't random. I came in for another late shift, walked behind the counter, and froze. Sitting neatly on the register was another bone, this one fresh, streaked with blood and tendons still clinging to it. No note, no explanation, just a silent message that he'd been there, that he knew my schedule, and that someday he might not leave so quietly. I started working nights at a KFC on the outskirts of town in 2015. It wasn't a bad job, just greasy and exhausting. The only part I truly hated was the indoor play area. It sat in the far corner of the store, sealed off by a glass wall so parents could keep an eye on their kids while eating. In the daytime, it was loud and full of laughter. Children climbing tunnels, sliding down tubes, and diving into the ball pit. But at night, with the lights dimmed and the dining area empty, it turned into something else. Silent. Hollow. Like a cage for something that shouldn't be disturbed. I didn't like going in there after closing, but it was part of the job. Every night, someone had to mop the floor, wipe down the slides, and make sure no kids had left toys behind. On my second week of night shifts, my manager, Victor, tossed me the keys. "Play area's yours tonight," he said casually. I sighed and rolled my eyes. Lucky me. Victor didn't laugh. He just muttered, "Don't stay in there too long." That night, the rain was coming down hard. The glass walls of the play area were streaked with water, making the world outside look warped and distorted. I grabbed my mop and bucket, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not the usual plastic and disinfectant, but something stale, damp, almost like wet clothes left in a corner too long. The overhead lights flickered as I began mopping. The plastic tubes creaked faintly in the stillness, as if shifting under a weight. That's when I heard it. A laugh. Soft, high-pitched, childlike. I froze, mop dripping water onto the floor. My heart thudded in my chest. The store had been closed for an hour. There were no customers, no children. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep cleaning. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was the rain. Then from the tunnel above me, I heard it again. Louder this time. He. I dropped the mop and spun around, my eyes darting up to the maze of slides and tunnels. The entrance yawned like a dark mouth. Suddenly, a plastic ball rolled out of the pit and stopped at my shoe. I backed away so fast I nearly tripped over the bucket. My pulse was racing now. That's when Victor appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, serious. "Out," he said firmly. I didn't argue. I bolted past him, leaving the mop behind. We locked the play area door and went back to the counter. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, trying to catch my breath. Victor rubbed his face. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say nothing. Then he muttered, "You heard him, didn't you?" My skin prickled. "Who?" Victor didn't look at me. "The boy?" I thought he was messing with me until a few nights later it happened again. This time I wasn't even in the play area. I was mopping the lobby when I glanced toward the glass wall. In the reflection, up in the second-floor tunnel, I saw a face. A pale boy's face watching me. His eyes were too wide, his mouth stretched in a grin that looked wrong. I spun around, heart hammering. The tunnel was empty. When I looked back at the glass, the face was gone. The next morning, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I asked Victor directly, "Who is he?" Victor sighed like he had been waiting for me to ask. "Years ago," he said quietly. Before I managed this place, a kid got trapped in the tunnels after closing. The night crew didn't realize until morning. By then, his voice faltered. It was too late. They say his parents never even claimed the body. The company covered it up, said it was an accident. I felt sick. And now, Victor stared at the locked play area. Now he plays alone. But he doesn't like being ignored. I should have quit right then, but I didn't. I needed the money. One night, toward the end of my shift, I made a mistake. I heard the laugh again, faint from the tunnels. And instead of running, I whispered, "What do you want?" The room went dead silent. Then from inside the plastic tubes, something shifted. A shadow darted past one of the porthole windows. I froze. Slowly, a small hand pressed against the glass. Pale, almost gray. Fingers too thin, nails too long. And behind it, the boy's face appeared, eyes black, mouth open in a wide, silent scream. The lights above me flickered violently, buzzing before snapping back on. When I blinked, he was gone. I quit the next week, but sometimes driving home past that KFC late at night, I glance at the darkened play area through the glass wall, and I swear I still see him. A pale boy grinning at me from the tunnels, still waiting to be noticed, still laughing in the dark. I had been working at KFC for almost 6 months when the strangest shift of my life happened. It was a Thursday night, the kind of night where everything feels off. The rain had been coming down in sheets since sunset, turning the parking lot into a black mirror. Our usual rush never came. No late-night families, no teenagers grabbing buckets before heading home. Just silence. By 10:45 p.m., it was only me and my manager, Rosa. She was in the back office counting the till, and I was stuck on cleanup duty, sweeping, mopping, wiping down the tables. I hated those last 15 minutes before closing. The restaurant always felt wrong, too quiet, too empty, like the building itself was holding its breath. And that night I realized I wasn't alone. I was mopping near the counter when I saw it, a man standing in the lobby. He wasn't there a second ago. No sound of the door opening, no chime, nothing, just there. Tall, thin. His clothes looked wrong, soaked from the rain but too clean, like he hadn't walked through mud or puddles to get inside. His hair was plastered flat, his skin pale under the buzzing fluorescent light. Sir? We're closed, I called out nervously. He didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head, slow and unnatural, like a puppet on a string. Then he started walking toward the counter. Each step echoed too loud on the tile, deliberate, measured. I took a step back, gripping the mop handle tighter. I said, "We're closed. You'll need to come back tomorrow." He stopped at the counter, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Then he whispered, "Still cooking." My stomach dropped. That was the same phrase an old coworker once mentioned to me, like a warning. A joke, I thought at the time, but hearing it out loud in that hoarse, wet voice felt wrong. Too wrong. I bolted for the office. Rosa looked up, startled, as I burst in. "There's someone out there," I gasped. She frowned. "That's impossible. I locked the front 10 minutes ago." But when we went back out together, the lobby was empty. The door was still locked. No sign of anyone. Only the floor was wet, small puddles of water, as though someone had been standing right where I saw him. Rosa gave me a look, half annoyed, half uneasy. "You're tired. Go finish up so we can leave," I wanted to argue, but I didn't. I just went back to mopping, my nerves on edge. At 11:30 p.m., we were finally ready to leave. Rosa locked the doors, set the alarm, and we walked to our cars parked on opposite ends of the lot. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the night was eerily still. As I unlocked my car, I glanced back at the restaurant. Through the glass front in the dim emergency lights, I saw him again. Standing inside, right where I had been mopping, his face pressed against the glass, mouth stretched into a grin that was too wide, too sharp. His hand lifted slowly, pressing flat against the window pane as if waving goodbye. I stumbled into my car, slamming the lockdown with shaking hands. Rosa's headlights flashed as she drove off, but I couldn't move yet. My eyes stayed locked on the window. And then, In the blink of an eye, he was gone. I didn't tell anyone. Not Rosa, not the other crew. But every shift after that I felt it. The weight of unseen eyes on me when I cleaned, the faint sound of footsteps on wet tile when no one was there. And sometimes, late at night when I drive past that KFC, the building dark and silent, I swear I still see him inside. Standing at the counter, waiting, whispering in that rasping voice I'll never forget. Still cooking. I never wanted to work the night shift. Back in 2018, when I got hired at the old Kentucky Fried Chicken on Willow Creek Road, I figured it would just be another boring food job. Fry the chicken, bag the orders, mop the floors, go home greasy and exhausted. Simple. But the Willow Creek KFC wasn't simple. From the outside, it looked normal enough. A squat beige building with peeling red trim, a cracked parking lot littered with cigarette butts, and a faded bucket sign that squeaked whenever the wind picked up. But there was something wrong about the place. I felt it the first night I walked in. The air was heavy, grease and oil, sure, but something else, something metallic. The lights hummed louder than they should, and the walls seemed damp. "Welcome to hell," one of the crew, a lanky guy named Daryl, muttered when he handed me my apron. He smirked like it was a joke, but his eyes didn't smile. The manager, Miss Elaine, was a wiry woman in her late 50s. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Rules are simple," she snapped. "Clock in on time. Don't waste food, and never ever go down into the basement after 11 p.m. I thought she was kidding. The basement? But she didn't laugh. She just looked me dead in the eye and said, "Lock the door." Every night, no matter what you hear. The first few weeks went fine. Busy dinners, quiet nights. Customers came and went, the fryers sizzled, the soda machine hissed, and I started to think maybe Miss Elaine's warning was just old superstition. But then, one slow Wednesday, I stayed late. It was just me, Daryl, and Elaine. The storm outside had knocked out half the streetlights, leaving the parking lot a black void. The power flickered twice while I was mopping. "Clock out, rookie," Daryl called from the back. "We got it covered." I almost did. But then I remembered. Basement duty. Every closing shift, someone had to check the supply room downstairs, make sure the freezer latch was shut, and lock the basement door. So I grabbed the keys. The basement door sat in the far back hallway, right beside the walk-in cooler, a heavy steel thing with a rusting padlock. When I turned the key, the hinges shrieked like something alive. The air that rushed up hit me like a wave, cold, damp, sour. I clicked on the light and stepped down the stairs. The basement smelled worse than the kitchen. Not grease, rot. The fluorescent tube above flickered weakly, leaving most of the room in shadow. Boxes of old promotional supplies, plastic toys, cardboard signs were stacked against the walls. The freezer hummed low in the corner. At first it seemed empty, quiet. Then I heard it. Thump. A dull, hollow sound from deeper in the dark. "Hello?" I whispered before I realized how stupid it was. No answer. Just another thump, louder this time. I gripped the mop handle like a weapon and took a cautious step forward. The light flickered again, plunging the far side of the basement into blackness. And in that brief moment, I swear I saw something move. A shadow, low to the ground. When the light buzzed back on, it was gone. My hands shook as I backed toward the stairs. Screw the freezer, screw the supplies. I bolted up the steps, slammed the door shut, and jammed the padlock in place. My heart wouldn't slow down for the rest of the night. That was just the beginning. In the days that followed, things got worse. Strange noises, scraping, dragging, whispering, seeped up from the basement after closing. Sometimes the door handle rattled on its own. Once, when Daryl went down to grab a box of cups, he came back pale and shaking, refusing to say what he saw. Miss Elaine only repeated the same thing every night. "Lock the door. Don't ask questions, don't look inside," but of course I couldn't stop thinking about it. What was down there? And why did it sound like it wanted to get out? I tried to ignore it. For 2 more weeks, I followed the rules: clean the fryers, wipe the counters, mop the greasy tile, lock the basement. Don't listen, don't think, don't question. But ignoring it was impossible. The noises grew louder. Some nights it was scratching like claws dragging over wood. Other nights it was wet slaps like raw chicken being thrown against the wall. And sometimes it was breathing. Heavy. Close. I asked Daryl once quietly while we restocked the sauce packets. "You ever wonder what's really down there?" He froze, his hand hovering over the sweet and sour bin. Slowly, he looked up at me. "Don't," he whispered. His voice shook. "Don't start asking." "It'll notice it," I pressed, but he just walked away. The next night we were short-handed. Elaine left early, saying she had to handle paperwork. Daryl called in sick. That left me alone with Jenna, a part-timer who spent more time scrolling her phone than working. Around 11:30 p.m. I heard it again. The scraping, louder than before. I froze at the register, straining to listen. Then came the bang. Something hit the basement door so hard the steel rattled. Jenna's head snapped up. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "Probably pipes," I lied, but my skin crawled. That wasn't pipes. At 11:45, while Jenna was in the bathroom, it happened again. This time I was in the hallway when I heard it. A long, high screech like nails dragging across the inside of the steel basement door. Then silence. Then, click. My stomach dropped. The padlock. It was moving. I watched in horror as the lock slowly twisted against the latch, metal groaning. Something inside was turning it from the other side. I ran forward and grabbed it just as the shackle popped open. "No!" I screamed, shoving the lock back into place, snapping it shut with shaking hands. For a second, the door slammed forward against me, rattling the frame. Something was pushing from the inside. My whole body strained as I leaned against it, breath ragged. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The pressure was gone. The basement was silent. When Jenna came back, she found me pale, drenched in sweat, clutching the padlock like a lifeline. "You okay?" she asked. I couldn't answer. My throat was too dry. The next morning, I confronted Elaine. "I'm not crazy," I said. "Something's down there." Something tried to unlock the door. Her face went cold. She shut her office door, lowered her voice, and said, "Listen to me and listen well. That basement is older than the building. It's been here since the 1950s. Nobody knows who dug it or why. All I know is when corporate bought this property, they told us, never open it after dark. Never. And whatever you do, don't let it out." I swallowed hard. "What is it?" Elaine's eyes flicked toward the hallway. She leaned closer. "Something hungry." That night, I told myself I wouldn't go near the basement. I'd follow the rules. Lock it, leave it, forget it. But curiosity has a way of eating at you. And around midnight, while Jenna smoked out back, I found myself standing before that door again. Keys in hand. The lock was cold in my palm. The steel door hummed faintly as if vibrating. I knew I shouldn't. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away. But my hand turned the key. The lock clicked open. The hinges groaned. And slowly I pulled the basement door wide. The stench hit me first. Rot. Decay. The smell of blood gone sour. The light above the stairs buzzed weakly, casting long shadows down into the gloom. The air was colder than before, so cold it hurt to breathe. I gripped the railing and took one step down, then another. Then I heard it. Skrrr. A faint sound of claws dragging over concrete. I froze. My eyes darted toward the far corner where the single bulb didn't reach. A shape was moving. Something crouched. Something big. The light flickered. Off, on, off. And in those stuttering flashes, I saw glimpses. A twisted frame. Long arms bent at the wrong angles. A face stretched too wide with a mouth full of teeth that glistened wet. And eyes. God, the eyes. Reflective. Animal. Locked on me. The bulb went out. The dark swallowed me whole. And then, in the silence, it whispered my name. The dark pressed against me like water. The bulb had gone out, leaving the basement drowned in blackness. And still, I heard it breathing. Slow. Wet. Just a few feet away. "Don't!" a voice hissed. Not mine. Not human. A whisper that slithered into my ear as if it came from inside my skull. My knees nearly gave out. My hands scrambled blindly against the wall, searching for the stairs. I had to get out. Now. Something moved in the dark. The scrape of claws on concrete. A low shuffle like skin dragging across the floor, then thump. A heavy footfall, too heavy, too close. I bolted. My feet pounded against the wooden steps as I sprinted up, nearly tripping in my panic. I slammed the basement door shut behind me and fumbled the padlock back into place, chest heaving, sweat pouring down my face. The silence after was worse than the noise. I could still feel its eyes on me, even through the steel. The next morning, Daryl cornered me in the break room. "You went down there, didn't you?" His voice wasn't angry, just broken. I couldn't speak, I just nodded. He swore under his breath, then rubbed his face. "You saw it." "What is it?" I demanded. "What's in the basement?" He hesitated, then he whispered, "It wasn't always there." Years ago, before Elaine managed this place, some kids broke in after hours, dared each other to spend the night in the basement. Only one came out. My stomach dropped. What happened to the others? "They never found them." His voice cracked. "But sometimes late at night we hear voices coming up from the basement. The ones who never left. Calling for help." I felt sick. Daryl leaned closer, eyes wide and wet. "It feeds, man. It needs to. If it doesn't, it gets stronger, hungrier. That's why we lock the door. That's why we never go down there." That night the noises were worse. I heard the scraping before closing. The whispers came while I mopped. And when Jenna left early, it was just me, alone with the door. At 12:03 a.m. I heard something new. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps on the inside of the steel. I froze. My hands clenched around the mop handle. Then a voice, soft and trembling. "Please, let me out." It wasn't the thing's whisper. It was human. Young. "Who's there?" I croaked. "It's Daryl," the voice said. I blinked. My blood ran cold. Daryl had called out sick. He wasn't here. The voice came again, more urgent. "Please, it's me. I'm stuck down here. You gotta open the door." The steel handle rattled. The padlock tugged. My heart slammed in my chest. "That's not him," I whispered to myself. And then slowly the voice changed. The tone deepened. Words stretched into guttural growls. "Open the door." The last word was a roar that shook the hinges. I stumbled back, the mop clattering to the floor. Something slammed into the door from the inside, hard enough to dent the steel. Dust rained down from the frame. Another slam, another. Each hit louder, stronger, hungrier. The walls shook, the lock rattled. And then, silence. Dead, suffocating silence. I thought it was over until I noticed something new. The bottom of the steel door where it met the tile was wet. A black, oily liquid seeped out, spreading across the floor. It moved too fast to be water, too thick to be grease. It crept like it was alive, inching toward my shoes. I scrambled back, tripping over the mop bucket. My elbow cracked against the counter as I crawled backward. The liquid stopped. Then it retracted, slurping back under the door as if it knew it had been seen. I sat there on the floor, trembling, staring at the dented steel, at the slick black stains that still glistened. Whatever was in the basement, it wasn't staying down there much longer. The next morning, Elaine was waiting for me. Her eyes were bloodshot, her lips pressed thin. "You opened it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She sighed, long and weary. "You don't understand what you've done." "What is it?" I demanded. My voice cracked. "What's down there?" Elaine looked at me for a long moment, then finally said, "It's not what. It's who." My skin prickled. "Long time ago," she whispered, "this town had a problem. Missing people, runaways, drifters. No one ever found them. Folks say they were taken down there, fed to something that shouldn't exist. something that still wears their voices. Their faces. I felt sick. Her voice dropped even lower. It's not just a basement. It's a mouth that night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. All I could think about was the door, the dents, the black ooze creeping across the tile, and the way it whispered my name in the dark. I always hated closing shifts, but bills don't pay themselves. That summer, I was covering nights at the KFC on Elm Street, a location that had seen better days. The paint peeled from the siding, the neon sign buzzed and flickered, and the kitchen floor was so greasy you could practically skate on it. Most nights were quiet. By midnight, the customers were gone, the fryers hissed their last, and the only sound left was the drone of the walk-in cooler. But lately, something felt off. It started with the bucket. One night after we'd shut everything down, I found a KFC bucket sitting on the front counter. The weird part? We hadn't sold a single bucket meal all day. It was old, at least 10, maybe 20 years. The design was wrong, faded red and yellow, with Colonel Sanders smiling wider than usual. His grin seemed stretched like a mask. "Hey, you leave this out?" I asked Miguel, the fry cook. He frowned. "Nah, man. Probably just old stock." But when I checked the storage room later, there were no buckets like that. Only the current white and red ones. So where did it come from? The next night, it was there again. Same bucket, same faded print, same wrong grin. But this time, it wasn't empty. Something inside moved. I swear I heard it. A faint slosh, like wet meat being stirred. My stomach turned. I lifted the lid and found nothing. Just grease stains and a faint coppery smell. Miguel swore I was messing with him. "You're seeing things, bro." Too much fryer smoke. But when I went to toss the bucket into the dumpster, the bottom felt warm, like it had been sitting under a heat lamp. By the third night, I couldn't ignore it. The bucket was waiting on the counter before I even unlocked the door. I didn't touch it. Not this time. I just stared at it. The grin on Colonel Sanders' face seemed wider now. His eyes looked darker, almost real. The longer I looked, the more it felt like the bucket was watching me. I shoved it into the back freezer, buried under boxes of frozen wings. Out of sight, out of mind. But around midnight, when I opened the freezer to grab more tenders, the bucket was back on the counter. And the lid was off. Inside, raw chicken pieces twitched. Not just twitching, crawling. Pink, slimy hunks of meat slithered over each other, fusing, pulsing. A wet sucking noise filled the kitchen, louder than the freezer fan. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The chicken stood up, not all at once, piece by piece. Drumsticks stuck together into legs, wings folded into arms, breast meat stretched and sagged into a torso. And at the top, glistening, greasy, raw, a face formed, not human, not animal, but smiling, the Colonel's grin. I bolted for the door, slipping on grease, nearly smashing into the fryer. My hands fumbled with the lock, heart hammering, as behind me the sound of slapping wet footsteps echoed closer. I didn't stop to look back. I tore out into the night, not caring if the alarm went off. The next day I quit. No explanation, no notice. Just dropped my apron on the manager's desk and left. But here's the thing. That was 3 years ago. I haven't eaten KFC since, haven't stepped foot in one. And yet, last week I woke up to find a bucket sitting on my kitchen counter. Faded red, too wide grin. And the lid, it was already open. It was a Monday night, one of those rare quiet nights at the KFC on Riverside Boulevard. The place smelled of fried chicken and cleaning solution, a mix that used to comfort me but now felt suffocating. I had been working there for almost 2 years, mostly night shifts, and I thought I'd seen it all. I was wrong. The shift had started like any other. By 10 p.m., the restaurant had emptied, leaving just me, the fryers, and the hum of fluorescent lights. The parking lot was empty except for a single sedan parked under the flickering street lamp, its headlights off. The car just sat there, quiet. I tried to ignore it, telling myself someone was probably just waiting for a delivery or a friend. But something about it felt deliberate, watching. Around 11:15 p.m., as I was wiping down tables, the front door creaked open. My stomach dropped. A man stepped inside. He didn't walk. He glided almost unnaturally, like he wasn't quite touching the floor. He wore a dark coat, the hood pulled low over his face, and his hands were gloved. His presence swallowed the room. The air felt heavier. "Evening," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "I need chicken." I froze. Most customers were weird, sure, but there was something off about him. Something wrong in the timbre of his voice, like it vibrated just below the normal human range. "We're closing soon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Orders stop in 10 minutes. He tilted his head as if considering me. "I'm not here to eat." My pulse quickened. "Then, what do you want?" He smiled, a slow, unnatural smile, and then he reached into his coat. For a moment, I thought he might pull a weapon. My fingers itched to reach for the alarm button under the counter. Instead, he pulled out a small paper bag and placed it on the counter. "Put it in the fryer," he said. "Now." I hesitated. I can't just do it." His voice was sharper this time, almost commanding. Against my better judgment, I took the bag and tossed it into the fryer. It hissed and bubbled, releasing a smell so foul that I gagged. Chicken, sure, but mixed with something metallic, something rotting. The man watched silently, his eyes glinting in the dim fluorescent light. Minutes passed. I didn't move. The fryer beeped, signaling the cooking was done. I pulled out the basket, and the chicken inside wasn't chicken anymore. It was pale, slimy, human-shaped, almost as if it had tried to mimic limbs. I stumbled back, tripping over the mop bucket. The man reached out. His gloved fingers hovered over the basket. "Eat it," he whispered. "It wants to see." I shook my head, backing away. "No, I'm calling the police." He laughed, a low, hollow sound that seemed to echo from inside the walls themselves. "By the time they get here, it will be too late," he said. I fled to the office, fumbling with the phone. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911. As I waited, I heard a soft tapping behind the counter. I glanced up. The fryer basket had shifted, the chicken moved. It crawled slowly, deliberately across the counter like a living thing. Tiny limbs, pale and wet, pressing against the steel. The metallic smell grew stronger. I gagged, covering my mouth. The man was gone. I spun around and he stood behind me, closer than I realized, his coat brushing my shoulder. "You shouldn't have done that," he whispered. The tapping grew faster, louder, like hundreds of tiny fingers drumming against metal. The pale shapes of the chicken began to sprout small, dark eyes. Eyes that blinked. Eyes that stared at me. I screamed, dropping the phone. The man reached down, dragging the basket away. "You saw too much," he said, "but it doesn't matter. You'll see again." Then he disappeared, just like that. By the time the police arrived, the man, the basket, and the malformed chicken were gone. All that remained was a faint coppery smell in the air, and a single red bucket on the counter, empty, but stained on the inside with something dark. I quit that night. Even now, months later, whenever I see a KFC sign flicker in the night, I feel it watching me, and I know the man is still out there. It was the last week before summer break, and I had picked up an extra closing shift at the KFC on Maple Avenue. Everyone else had begged off. Something about the shift had given the staff the creeps lately. But I needed the extra cash. I should have listened to them. The restaurant was nearly empty that night. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long, jerky shadows across the greasy tile floor. The fryers hissed, bubbling like some kind of living thing. Normally, the smell of fried chicken comforted me. Tonight, it made my stomach turn. I was stacking clean trays when I noticed it, a red bucket sitting on a corner table near the back. At first, I thought it had been left behind by a customer. But then I realized it was the wrong bucket, faded, older than the current stock, and something about it felt alive. The grin on Colonel Sanders' face seemed stretched, too wide, too eager. I felt my chest tighten. I tried to ignore it. But the bucket wasn't alone. The back door, the one leading to the storage area and basement, was cracked open even though I was sure I had closed it. A cold draft whispered up from the dark basement steps. I froze, heart hammering. "Hello?" I called softly, my voice bouncing off the metal shelving. No answer. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound, like something dragging itself along the floor below. I should have left. I should have run. But curiosity and some sick, stubborn part of me drew me toward the basement. I grabbed a flashlight from the counter and descended the steps. The smell hit me first. Raw meat, metallic, rotting. My stomach turned, bile rising. The bucket had followed me. Somehow it was at the bottom of the stairs now, glowing slightly under the flashlight beam. I reached for it and froze. Inside the bucket, chicken pieces were moving, twisting, crawling. They weren't chicken anymore. Limbs formed, twisted, pale and slimy. Faces emerged, tiny and malformed, screaming silently as they pressed against the sides of the bucket. I stumbled back, my flashlight clattering to the floor. When it hit the concrete, the beam wavered and landed on him. The man, the same shadowy figure from the previous encounters. His coat hung loosely, his hood down, revealing a face pale and angular, eyes black as oil, grinning like the colonel himself. "You've seen too much," he whispered, voice like a blade. I ran, tried to ascend the stairs, but they seemed longer than they should have been. The basement stretched, impossibly deep, like the building itself had grown while I wasn't looking. The bucket followed, hopping across the floor as if alive. The chicken creatures inside writhed, scraping against the concrete, reaching for me with tiny clawed hands. Their cries were a wet, gurgling chorus that made my ears bleed. I reached the first landing and froze again. The walls were lined with more buckets, old buckets, faded red with grins stretched wider than humanly possible. They moved on their own, whispering my name, beckoning me closer. "Join us," they hissed. I slammed the emergency exit door, but it didn't budge. The man was there at the top of the stairs now, slowly descending. The basement seemed endless, yet he covered it in a single step. "Why? What is this?" I stammered. "It's business," he said almost cheerfully. "Everyone loves the taste of KFC. They just don't know how deep the flavor goes." The bucket leapt from the landing at my feet. The chicken creature inside formed a humanoid shape, shaking off its greasy shell. It lunged at me. I screamed, grabbed a nearby mop and swung it, hitting nothing but air. I bolted down a side corridor I hadn't noticed before. The basement twisted, corridors multiplying. Buckets appeared at every turn, some levitating, some crawling, all with faces, all watching. I could hear him laughing behind me, low and hollow, echoing through the endless concrete. Then I saw it, a trapdoor leading to a smaller, darker room. I slammed it open and dove inside. The smell was worse here, almost unbearable. The walls were smeared with grease, old blood, and something else, something moving. In the center of the room, a massive red bucket sat on a pedestal. It was huge, big enough to hold a person. The grin on Colonel Sanders' face stretched impossibly wide, and the lid moved on its own, rattling. I didn't hesitate. I jumped on it, slamming it shut. The bucket quivered and shuddered beneath me. Screams and sloshing noises filled the air. Then, silence. I stayed there, heart pounding, listening. Nothing. Finally, I climbed out, dragging the bucket with me. The basement stairs had returned to normal length. The storage area was just a storage area again. The red bucket sat silently, harmless, or at least it appeared so. I ran out of the KFC that night, never looking back. The next morning, the manager called. The store had been trashed overnight. Fryers overturned, counters slashed, buckets everywhere, but when investigators came, they found no footprints, no cameras captured anything unusual. I quit. Permanently. Months later, I received a package at my apartment. Inside was a red KFC bucket, older than any I had ever seen, and a note. We'll see you again. Soon. I never opened it, I never will. And sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I swear I hear the soft, wet scratching of tiny fingers against metal, whispering my name. The KFC on Maple Avenue is still open, still serving fried chicken. But I know the truth. Some recipes are better left uneaten. Some doors are better left unopened. And some nights, the bucket chooses you.